It's Timmy Joe coming at you from the bridge of the Enterprise. Or at least what looks like that. We are going to do a full roll up your sleeves overclocking guide today on the Ryzen 7 1700 using the Asus Prime B350 chipset. You know what? It's a lot of people have been asking me about it in the comments ever since I started my Ryzen videos. I never thought this would be an interesting video, but it seems like the more I put time and effort into overclocking videos and stuff like that, the more questions that pop up that just kind of lead me to realize that not everyone knows everything about this stuff, and especially if you're new to Ryzen, you're new to overclocking, you might want like a start to finish guide on everything you need to know. So I'm going to give you that, and it's going to be pretty intense, and it's going to be a long video, so get your popcorn made, sit down in your easy chair. We're going to get this all set up. So cue an intro, and we're going to talk all about overclocking Ryzen 5, 7, whatever, on the B350 chipset, and maybe you'll even stick around if you're on the X370. So we are going to start our video here in the wonderful world of Windows. And what I like to do is, if you have things like Steam that open with Windows, just get rid of them. Get Windows down to the bare minimum. Whenever you're doing testing for overclocking or running Cinebench or benchmarking scores, just kind of gets some headroom out of the way. And you're going to need some Windows programs to do this properly, both for hardware monitoring and for system stability testing, and just to see what kind of performance you're actually getting as kind of a benchmark. So right off the hop, I guarantee you'll want to download CPU-Z and Hardware Monitor. They're both available at cpuid.com, and they are both wonderful tools for showing you what you got for hardware and where your temperatures and your megahertz and your gigahertz are all lying. So you can see here in your CPU-Z, I've got my Ryzen 1700 clocked at stock everything. I reset to optimize defaults in the BIOS, which is you don't want to be doing that. If you're buying a Ryzen system, let's overclock it. It's like buying a Ferrari and putting a really, big air filter on it to get good fuel economy. Unleash that baby. We want to go fast with our crazy fast, awesome computer. So let's launch Hardware Monitor for the fourth time, for God's sakes here. And between these two programs, you can see a lot. You can see that we're running at 3 gigahertz. Sometimes it boosts up on a few clocks. Ryzen does that. If you have an 1800X or a 1600X, leaving it at stock isn't the worst thing because it's going to take advantage of a lot of the cores. But if you're buying one of the lower spec CPUs, overclock the damn thing because it doesn't do it for you automatically very well. You can see here we got lots of cores, and in Hardware Monitor it shows the CPU temperature. We're running real cold at stock here, 24 degrees, idle. Like, it probably wouldn't even get much above like 35 degrees Celsius on my CPU. Ryzen runs really efficiently at stock speeds, but we're going to see this all change in a moment. So the other programs you're going to want is Cinebench R15, which you can download just by Googling it. Find Cinebench R15 64-bit, and it hasn't changed in a couple of years. It's actually getting kind of antiquated at this point. But it shows all that information, relevant information in it as well, and we're going to use this to show what kind of performance we're actually getting out of it. And then the last program we will show at the end, IDA 64 is something you'll need, and what it does is it's really good for last step not benchmarking, but stability testing. Once we run Cinebench and at the max overclock, and it runs 3 or 4 times without restarting the computer, you'd want to actually kick into IDA 64, run it for a certain amount of time, like 30-40 minutes, make sure that your computer doesn't restart, make sure your temperatures aren't anywhere above like 70 degrees Celsius on your CPU. So that is what you'll need in Windows. So let's get Hardware Monitor open here, and let's get Cinebench open. We are going to take some baseline benchmarks. Keep in mind you want to have Steam, BitTorrent, everything closed in your system tray like I do. And we're just going to keep an eye on temperatures and hardware monitor here up here at the CPU temperature just to see how high it gets. And we'll run Cinebench, see what kind of score we can get at bone stock on a 1700. This will actually noticeably get a lot faster once we've overclocked the CPU. But this takes about 30 seconds, 35 seconds. And if you're on like an old Intel Core i7 from a few years ago, this will take a while. And the score will be nowhere near what a Ryzen can do, because Ryzen's actually got quite the awesome multi-threaded performance. But we're going to get like 1392, so we're almost at 1400. Keep that number in mind. And, we see that our max temperature never got above 40 degrees Celsius. It might get to 45 eventually if we kept running that test over and over again. But we are done with Windows for now. So I'm going to go ahead and boot into the BIOS, and we'll do some tweaking. Just in case you're a complete noob and you don't know how to get into the BIOS, it usually tells you at the start on this black screen here. But you'll want to hit delete multiple times when that beep from your computer happens, or F2, and eventually you should see a screen like this one. This is the Asus UEFI BIOS. It is a graphical user interface. It's lovely. It's pretty nice compared to the old DOS style BIOSes we used to have to deal with. I've been overclocking since the days of AMD Duron, like at 800 megahertz. So, I know what I'm doing in this, and they've made it a hell of a lot easier these days. So we get some basic information on this first screen, but some things you might want to tweak with on this is just, you can see your hard drives in here. You can see your fan control in here. But you're not going to get to the meat and potatoes of overclocking unless you go to advanced mode by hitting F7 or clicking it. And you'll get to a main page where we see some basic frequencies and stuff like that. But in my BIOS, it's under AI Tweaker. In other BIOSes, it might be called Overclocking Tuner. It might be called this. It might be called that. But you want to get to a screen where you get to play with frequencies and CPU clocks and memory speed, stuff like that. And that's where you should see this information. If you're on the B350 motherboard from Asus, it'll look exactly like this. So right off the hop, you want to overclock your RAM if you do have some fast memory. I have the 3000 kit from Corsair Vengeance LPX, and I now with the BIOS update can get my memory running really any overclock almost at 2666. Before it was only I was only able to overclock it to 2400. So some Asus BIOS updates have been doing some good for memory overclocking, which is nice. But I wish I could get to 2933, but I'm locked at 2666. So right off the hop, what you want to do is go to AI Overclock Tuner, and in here hit DOCP. If you have this option, this will load a memory profile like right from your RAM and set your timings manually instead of Asus just the BIOS actually doing it automatically for you, because it'll put the proper timing values in the DRAM timing control for you. If you double click that and look in here, 15, 17, 17, 35, this is written on the memory, like actually on the RAM itself, but we don't have to do this because it does it automatically as long as you click that setting, which is really nice. So DOCP, but my memory, like I said, doesn't go any higher than 2666, so we're going to downclock it to that. You'll want to watch that, because right here you might want to check and see how high your RAM goes. A lot of people like to overclock first, then adjust the RAM. But you might want to just see how high your memory can go at stock speeds, because I can go to 2933, but only at stock speeds. It will not let me go any higher. Another thing to keep an eye on is you'll see that once you hit that profile, it changes your DRAM voltage to 1.35 instead of 1.2. And I even like to put it a little bit higher, 1.365, just because that'll help maintain the stability of your RAM overclock. I even go as far as to under VTTDDR voltage, I change this to 0.68, and that's at the advice of Tech City, another YouTuber who said that helped him maintain a stability in his RAM overclocks, and it actually did help me. When that was set to default, I was having some random restarts at that new frequency, so good on him for giving me that information. So now here, this is your memory overclock, and your RAM is overclocked, but your CPU hasn't been touched. Where you do that is under CPU, custom CPU core ratio. You don't really need to change that. That's where you change your multiplier and your Northbridge frequencies or whatever. Don't even touch that. Keep that on auto. And if you have CPU core ratio, that's all you need to change to overclock your computer, which is awesome. It's literally putting in a value here. Now you can click it, make sure it's selected, make sure it's blue, and start pressing the plus sign, and it'll do it for you. But this was set at 30 when we, really technically, when we started at optimized defaults. We're going to bring her up to 38.5 because I know mine will actually go to 39.5 stable, but we'll start off at 38.5 and we'll boot one more time in here and kind of show you incrementally how we do this. And a couple other things we want to change is the voltage. Now on this B350 chipset, I'm not sure if it's the same for all motherboards, but at least for the Asus, you can't directly control the voltage. You have to do it in this offset mode, which is kind of weird to me. But you change the VDDCR CPU voltage from auto to offset mode, and then you want it in a positive offset, and you want to change this auto to all the way the most it'll go, which is 0.2 volts. So the standard voltage is 1.35. This should take it to 1.38. Which isn't even high enough. Ideally for an overclock, you want to be able to go way over 1.4, 1.42. It's kind of getting it a little too far. But this is saying, hey, at least go this high. And the motherboard will actually go even higher all on its own, depending on this next setting, which is you go into DI, GI plus VRM. In this setting is where your load line calibration is. Your CPU load line calibration is basically kind of a limit at what point your computer automatically restarts in case there's a problem with voltage and stuff. And it by auto will probably be set too low. You'll want to set it to high. Also set the SoC load line calibration to high if you're overclocking. This really shouldn't hurt anything. You're not going to fry your CPU. I wouldn't go to extreme in here, but set it to high. That'll just make sure that if you're kind of on that bleeding edge of an overclock, it should maintain stability, and anything further than that, it will automatically reset the system. A few other things in the BIOS you'll want to look at is you go up here, QFan control. QFan control is where you'll set your fan time or your fan speeds. You could do this in software, but as I said before in another video, I had the Asus AI Suite software to do this, and it was messing with my computer. So now we're going to do it right in the BIOS. And what I actually set these to is turbo. And you could do it manually and set a curve yourself, but I find that turbo on all the fans will keep them running a little higher and kick them in a little sooner. But at idle, they're not very audible, which is nice. Where I found on standard, they took too long to kick in and allowed the temperatures to get too high too quick. So now that all of them are set to turbo, that means they're going to kick in a little sooner. And if you really want to get into playing with this, you could go to town on setting your own custom fan curves. And also keep in mind what kind of fans you're running. I only have control in the motherboard for 3 fans, which is my CPU fan, which is technically my radiator fan, my CPU pump on one of the headers, and my case fan on the side, my big 140mm Corsair fan. All the rest are just set to, they're plugged into my power supply, running all the time. So let's go ahead and exit out of that. All that should be set. And one last thing, you can go into tools, at least in Asus BIOS here, and there's an overclocking profile you can set here. So when you get stable overclocks, you can save the profile in here and maybe have like a silent like really lower clocked profile, gaming profile, and an extreme profile. But it gives you like 10 assignments here, and I've put a few in here, but keep in mind they do reset themselves every time you update the BIOS. So I just tend to like to do everything manually anyways, but you can save overclocking settings in here so you can quickly jump between them if need be. And how you would do that is you just go down here and make a name for them. So test 2, and then we'll go ahead and put that in slot 4 and press enter, and then it actually just says yes, and then you see here test 2 is now in profile 4. So now that we've got all of those settings changed, we're going to save, exit, and reset. It gives you a list of everything that has changed here, and when we hit OK, the system should reset itself, and if everything went to plan, the system should just boot like it always did. If there was a problem, if you set something too high at this point, your system might start screaming at you. Don't worry, that's normal. In my computer, at least, with the Asus BIOS, it'll try and boot into an overclock setting 3 times. It'll cycle through its like on and off stage, and you'll hear the beeps. And then after the 3rd time, it resets your BIOS defaults and actually says like hit F1 to continue on the first post screen, and allows you to go in and make the changes yourself. Or if you're impatient, you could just hold the power button, turn it back on, and it should optimize the defaults, put you back into your BIOS. You can downclock a little bit and then try again. So here we are. We're booted into Windows, and we're going to go ahead and run Hardware Monitor to check our temperatures as we run Cinebench. And we'll run Cinebench through a few times just to make sure that we don't get any restarts while Cinebench runs. Cinebench is a benchmarking program that basically puts your computer at full load, and you saw it takes about 30 seconds to run through. If you run it 3 or 4 times and you don't ever have a restart, your system should be pretty stable, and you could move on and bump the clocks up just a bit more, come back, run the test a couple more times. And what's great about doing this kind of process is you get to see the performance gains live as you're going. So we're going to go ahead and exit out of Steam, exit out of Daemon Tools. We're going to go ahead and load Hardware Monitor, and we're going to load Cinebench. So we remember that we had 1392 last time, stock speeds, and we never really got above like 45 degrees Celsius. We're gonna run this, and I bet we add 300 points right off the hop to our Cinebench score. So it'll really show the benefits of overclocking your CPU right here, right now. It'll be very obvious that something you should do if you have the time and patience to go ahead and do it. It actually isn't even that hard. 1684. So we nearly added 300 points. We added about 290 points to our Cinebench score just by going in the BIOS one time and flipping through a few settings. Now, if you have the AMD Wraith cooler, I can testify it can get to about 3.8 gigahertz, no problem. But anything above that on any Ryzen CPU, I'd say you're pushing it. So we're going to run this one more time, just verify that it worked, it's golden. We'll check our temperatures. They are higher now. We're maxing out at 52 degrees Celsius. It might even get to in IDA 64 if we ran it for a while at this speed, to somewhere around 60, 62. So 1684, no problem. What I'll do is I'll snap my fingers here, and we'll up the voltage or the CPU ratio just a little bit more, show you that we got just a little bit more in Cinebench here. So I went back into the BIOS and I switched it to 39.25, and what that does is it makes it so I'm on the cusp. I can get to 4 gigahertz on this CPU, but I feel like that's too far. I like to dial it back just a bit, and if I'm 100 megahertz or 75 megahertz off of my extreme overclock capabilities, but I'm completely stable, I don't have to worry about it, my fans run a little bit slower, then that's where I like to sit. So you can see here now, if you go up here, You got your temperatures of the CPU, and they're already hitting 40, but that's, not much has changed. It shows the RPM at which your fans are running at. It shows your wattage. It shows a whole lot of information. Now, we're going to go ahead and run Cinebench one more time, and let's hopefully break the 1700 mark. And kind of show you how far along you can come from 1394 Cinebench score all the way to, we'll say, 1700 by just taking a bit of time and going into your BIOS. Even if you have the stock Wraith cooler and you only go to 3.7 gigahertz, you're making sure that your computer is running as efficiently as possible. So we hit 1704 on our Cinebench score. That is lovely. And you could run this a few more times. I already have in the past. And once you can verify that that score is stable, your computer never shuts off, then you can go ahead and run IDA 64. I'll show you what that looks like. And I only really use it, even though it has lots of functionality. It has a hardware monitor built in. I really only use it for stability tests. You go to Tools and Stability Test, and this is what Linus Tech Tips always uses to verify temperatures. Basically, it'll put a full load on the CPU, and you can watch the temperatures in a graph here. You can see the CPU utilization, and you let this run for a while, like 30 minutes at least. You'll see your temperatures spike, come down, and level out, especially if you have an aftermarket AIO cooler, like an all-in-one water solution, because it takes a while for the fluid to normalize in an aftermarket cooler. It might look really cold for the first 10 minutes and then actually start climbing up. So keep that in mind, but I would run this for a half hour once my overclock is stable, and I have before, just to make sure that if you're in the middle of gaming, you're not going to be in the middle of a CSGO match or whatever, a World of Warcraft match, and your overclock just shuts your computer off out of nowhere because it's reached a certain point of no return on your overclock, and it shuts itself off. Everything that I use for builds is below in the description. There's Amazon affiliate links, and if you click through to them and buy some stuff on Amazon, it really helps me out. But I'm Watch Timmy Joe on Instagram and Twitter, and if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. Thanks very much for sitting through this long video, and I hope it helped you out. Have a good day.